West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
We are in the very midst of revolution. The most complete, unexpected, and remarkable of any in the history of the world. How few of the human race have ever had an opportunity of choosing a system of government for themselves and their children. I am not without apprehensions, gentlemen. But the end we have in sight is more than worth all the means.
That was a scene from the critically acclaimed HBO miniseries John Adams, depicting when Adams, who was part of the Declaration of Independence drafting committee, attempts to persuade other members of the Continental Congress to vote in favor of declaring the colonies free from British control. Other than that 2008 HBO series, John Adams might not get as much of a historical look as the likes of Washington and Jefferson, but he was nonetheless instrumental to the birth of the nation. And so the second president who we're focusing on this morning in our week-long conversation with acclaimed writer and journalist Tom Ricks and his new book, First Principles, What America's Founders Learned from the Greeks and Romans and How That Shaped Our Country. Also with us, biographer, historian, and journalist Richard Brookhiser. His latest book is titled Give Me Liberty, A History of America's Exceptional Idea. Richard is also a senior editor for National Review. Of course, that series inspired by David McCullough's wonderful book on John Adams. But I don't think, Tom, they would put the John Adams that you discovered in an HBO miniseries. You had said he's the odd man out among the first presidents. He lived modestly, that was positive, but you also said, like, I think even McCullough, that he was quirky, self-obsessed, anxious, and vain. And you had a quote, someone said of him, he was very great while he spoke of his country, but he was almost as little when he spoke of himself. Talk about this man who achieved greatness in spite of many of his personal failings.
I want to begin by saying that it's particularly timely to talk about today, as I was watching your discussions of the failure of the current president to acknowledge his defeat and to begin a transition. The first president in this country to turn over power peacefully to the opposition was John Adams. And that was a great act. Now, being John Adams, he also didn't show up at the inauguration of Thomas Jefferson, his successor. He left town on the 4 a.m. coach to Baltimore. He is the most modern of these first four presidents in many ways. He wears his feelings on his sleeve. He is extraordinarily vain. He constantly thinks he doesn't get enough credit. I suspect this is because, unlike the other peers in this book, he never really had a mentor. He was so off-putting, I think, to people. He was so anxious, so ambitious in many ways, that despite being an honest man, an intelligent man, nobody ever really wanted to take him under their wing. He's a very prickly guy. I think he was also very fortunate that he married a wonderful woman. If it's possible to have a crush on a woman who's been dead for 200 years, I have a crush on Abigail Adams. But I think also that John Adams' great failure as president was backing the Alien and Sedition Acts and basically saying anybody who criticizes me or the government is a traitor and I'm going to throw him in jail. And he throws a bunch of journalists in jail, really maliciously. So an editor in New York, Thomas Greenleaf, is going to be indicted, but then he is killed by smallpox. So they indict his wife, his widow. She falls ill as well. So they indict the printer of the newspaper. And they went after the opposition newspapers. And when Jefferson became president, he put an end to all that nonsense. But it really was a reactionary action by Adams.
Yeah, he was such a hothead. I remember reading in McCullough's book that he heard a battle going over the common area in his own town and was excited. He basically said, I don't care whether we win or lose, I just like the action. And it reminds me of what you wrote about George Washington when he was being attacked for being indecisive. And you stated that far better to be indecisive and careful than to be decisive and wrong. And that, in fact, is what saved the Republic. Washington's, at times, indecisiveness when there was no clear way forward. But Adams, while we're showing these two men, you also point out, well, George Washington was still trying to acquire status in the British Army. John Adams was calling for revolution. So he really was the first among the four presidents to see where the United States needed to go.
And as was said, he got the revolutionary ball rolling, especially in New England. And I think that's what his real greatness was, is even before the First Continental Congress, of talking about revolution and publicly siding with it, saying, yes, I am going to go to the Continental Congress, even when his best friend tried to talk him out of it and said that he would lose and it would be awful for him. As a member of Congress during the Revolution, I have to say, though, when you read his commentary and defense, it must have driven Washington bananas. Adams thought he knew a lot about military affairs, and I have no idea why. Maybe Richard Brookhiser does. He knows this period better than I ever will. But he constantly is sort of saying Washington's wrong on strategy. Everybody talks about a slow defensive war. That's nuts. We need to just go out and have a big battle and win this thing, which is the opposite of the way to win this thing, as Washington knew.
It is Thursday, the 12th of November of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well. Today would be a good day for Donald Trump to concede, but he won't. In fact, even after it's all said and done with and Joe Biden and Kamala are working hard to undo all of the havoc and wreckage that this, treasonous Russian asset has wrecked, he still will be putting it out there that he really won. Yeah, he's out there today saying that there's something about illegal ballots and he really won. And even though Arizona has now gone to Joe Biden and he has now more electoral votes in history. 306? I think it's a little more. No, I think it's 306. And that's what I read. I have to now check out if that's truly the case. But I'm pretty sure 306. That's pretty good. All righty. Well, do we have our work cut out for us? Because, it would have been nice to have captured some state houses. What happened there? If there's any voting irregularities, I'd like to know about those. Once again, there have been instances, and I don't know how it works mostly in these, the Republican districts, shall we say, and counties and states. But they seem to garner more votes than there are people in the district, and I cannot figure that out. And there's not an uproar about it. But some guy interviewed by Project Veritas and James O'Keefe himself, and no one bats an eye? Well, some of us did, but it's put out there, and then Bill Barr says we have to go out and look for credible claims. Well, that wasn't credible from the beginning because it was James O'Keefe and Project Veritas. Then it turns out that Project Veritas actually wrote the affidavit for the guy to sign in the first place. All right. How about the election fraud of getting rid of all of those mail sorting machines? How about that? You going to be looking into that? All right. Well, and now Dan Patrick in Texas is offering $1 million, he says, of his money. Yeah, right. To find voter fraud. They can't find it themselves. Now they're going to open source. Of course there's going to be people calling in voter fraud, and it'll be with a big QAnon letterhead on it, of course. Of course. What have they done? What is the reason? I thought we were all in this together, It's you and me, buddy. Even though we disagree, we'll shake hands and we'll keep America great together. Now it's no. They don't want anything to do with America because there's brown and black people in it. Okay, well, maybe we should find some far-flung isle for them to go to. There's not that many. 70 mil? Not that many. I'd send them to some giant landmass. Where would that giant landmass be? Well, of course, there's already people there, I know. But if they want to go to Mother Russia, why don't they just go? I think they'd find it, well, rather familiar maybe to them. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe they'd come to their senses at that point. Because I don't understand how a Russian asset like Ron Johnson is still able to even be in politics, let alone making proclamations about policy. In our lifetime, if a Ron Johnson had done something like that back in the McCarthy era, even though they purport that McCarthy is their great hero and Roy Cohn is their great hero, if they had anything to do, and I know that this is a little bit different than commie Russia, all right? I don't know, maybe they would have liked it because crooks are crooks. Now, I don't want to say that all crooks are fascists, but all fascists are crooks. So maybe if they had this mob cartel government, maybe back in the 50s, the certain power types in the right wing would have found it perfectly okay. But now we have a mob cartel government of our own, and it may only be a subsidiary of Vlad. Why are these fellows being burrowed in and replacing career types in intel and defense? Is it to hand over stuff to Vlad? I don't know. Knowing Trump, He's getting this stuff so he can parse it out. He and the kids can parse it out. They'll have an auction. Kimberly will give a lap dance to the highest bidder that wins, from around the world that gets this intel. So I guess Vlad's going to get a lot of lap dances. But if I were Vlad, and I've said this before, and I know Vlad, we all do, he'd probably pay more not to get the lap dance. I know I would. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fine Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays? Well, I just wanted to put in a little bit of historical perspective because John Adams, by all, history and reportage, was pretty much a dick. Well, he was an iconoclast, shall we say. Vain. Whenever I hear the term vain in the historical sense, I know it was a lot more than just that. And, but, how he differs from the vanity of a Donald Trump is that he actually was a man of substance. So let's not forget about that. But he being the second president of the United States, now understand, there was a peaceful transition of power initially when Washington stepped down after 2 terms. So in a sense, we have to look at Adams as the first popularly elected president to hand over the reins of power peacefully. In spite of his vanity, in spite of his insecurity that caused him to want to hold on to power and increase his power. Power does have a strange way of corrupting the soul. Isn't that weird? I guess. That's why you would hope that those who get into leadership positions have a certain level of maturity. You would hope. Or at least an intellectual understanding of their limits or what their limits should be as it concerns their fellows in the community. And I mean fellows in a non-gender way, please. We don't have that now, do we? Who do we blame? How much religious upbringing did Trump really get? I don't know. Maybe not much. From what I've been able to gather, and the rest of us, they came here, even Granddad. He was a pimp. Well, he was a draft dodger, a deserter, and a pimp. What was Fred? He's a mobster crook running real estate scams out there in New York. Nobody does anything in real estate unless you go through the mob. Let's be clear. I mean, is the sky blue? So we all knew, well, anybody who had like half a brain who was following what was going on in America knew that Donald Trump is a crook, at least. We know that to get those buildings built in New York, he had to go through the mob. Everybody knows that the concrete contractors were mob run. I mean, even Sonny the Bull divulged that under oath in testimony. In fact, I believe Sonny the Bull even named Donald Trump as being, he built New York, he had to come through me. So up until now, Donald Trump has been able to get away with it. How about we don't let him? So, John Adams, one of the founders. But he had the wherewithal, a level of maturity, and probably a much stronger spouse in terms of her moral fortitude. Because I don't think Melania has much in the way of, shall we say, moral fortitude. No, I don't. Oh, God, I can't wait for Jill to put the rose garden back and everything else. Gosh. And she's going to continue teaching. Jill. Now that is moral fortitude that we love, and that is what really makes America great. Okay, on the rest of the menu, most states are not prepared to distribute Pfizer's finicky COVID-19 vaccine. Yeah, do we have that much dry ice in America? I mean, they couldn't have, like, plastic gloves. They didn't have face masks. Now we're going to have enough dry ice to keep this vaccine at a temperature that is ungodly cold. Well, it looks like oil field operations likely triggered the recent earthquake swarms in California a few miles from the San Andreas Fault. Hey, we've seen that movie. Let's not do that. And the nation's first regional hub for Jetson-like flying cars is being built in Central Florida. Florida. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Dutch police are investigating after shots were fired at the Saudi embassy in Amsterdam. Oh, really? And Australia will appoint a special investigator to examine possible prosecution of its military for crimes in Afghanistan. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Off to the rightish of the page is our chat room link, and our chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln because you got to have a monitor. And we do, and thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of that chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and maybe send us the equivalent of an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, we're able to stretch those dollars beyond compare because we are quantum mechanics and we leave no quantum filament unstretched. And we pay our bills, fly under the radar, and it looks like we're going to have to continue resisting this fascist attempt to take over America. We're not going to let it happen. Not one bit. And you're allowing us to fulfill our civic duty to keep fascism at bay. Damn right. Thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and he does it. Thank you. And he does everything else that he does. Thank you, Tom. I take care of me, and I am known as at Justice Putnam on Netroots Radio because that's who I am. I'm Justice Putnam. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. And get that linked up on, well, Twitter and other social media platforms. A little bit harder on Facebook because you know how Facebook is. We all do. And you can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. Okay, let's dive into this first offering here. And it comes out of ProPublica. Oh, I scrolled down too far. I need to find the reporters. Isaac Ansdorf, Ryan Gabrielson, and Carolyn Chen of ProPublica put this first offering together here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. As the first coronavirus vaccine takes a major stride toward approval, state governments' distribution plans show many are not ready to deliver the shots. The challenge is especially steep in rural areas, many of which are contending with a surge of infections, meaning that access to the first batch of COVID-19 vaccines may be limited by geography. But also, I think your pocketbook might have something to do with it. There's some other reporters that shows that quite a bit of the vaccine's already been bought up by deep pocket types. I wonder who those are. Middlemen? Yeah. Pfizer announced on Monday that his vaccine demonstrated more than 90% effectiveness and no serious bad reactions in early trial results. Of course, let's remember, that's Pfizer saying that, okay? That's their ad people saying that. Anyway, an impressive outcome that will pave the way for the company to seek an emergency authorization once it collects more safety data for another week or two, but establishing that the vaccine is safe and effective is just the first step. The Pfizer vaccine is unusually difficult to ship and store. It is administered in 2 doses given 28 days apart. Has to be stored at temperatures of about minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that's colder than hell, by definition. And it will be delivered in dry ice-packed boxes holding 1,000 to 5,000 doses. These cartons can stay cold enough to keep the doses viable for up to 10 days, according to details provided by the company. In other words, not only do we have a shortage of dry ice, do we have the containers to hold the dry ice? And I want to know if Jared and Ivanka have bought any futures in those industries. The ice can be replenished up to 3 times. Once open, the packages can keep the vaccine for 5 days, but can't be opened more than twice a day. The vaccine can also survive in a refrigerator for 5 days, but can't be refrozen if unused. Health officials haven't figured out how to get the ultra-cold doses to critical populations living far from cities, according to a ProPublica review of distribution plans. So let me get this straight. They're going to have problems distributing this? We already have an infrastructure. I mean, let's look at the fast food industry. How are they able to get their products everywhere? Somebody must be an expert at it. Let's talk to them. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the conversation by Thomas H. Gerbel, assistant professor at the University of Memphis. The way companies drill for oil and gas and dispose of wastewater can trigger earthquakes at times in unexpected places. In West Texas, earthquake rates are now 30 times higher than they were in 2013. Studies have also linked earthquakes to oil field operations in Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, and Ohio. California was thought to be an exception, a place where oil field operations and tectonic faults apparently coexisted without much problem. Now, new research shows that the state's natural earthquake activity may be hiding industry-induced quakes. Now, as a seismologist, the professor has been investigating induced earthquakes in the U.S., Europe, and Australia. His latest study, released on November 11th, shows how California oil field operations are putting stress on tectonic faults in an area just a few miles from the San Andreas Fault. I'm telling you, this movie has already been made, and they're going to make a sequel right now. Industry-induced earthquakes have been increasing concern in the central and eastern United States for more than a decade. Most of these quakes are too small to be felt, but not all of them. In 2016, a magnitude 5.2 quake damaged buildings in Pawnee, Oklahoma, and led state and federal regulators to shut down 32 wastewater disposal wells near a newly discovered fault. Large earthquakes are rare far from tectonic plate boundaries, and Oklahoma, experiencing 3 magnitude 5 or greater earthquakes in 1 year, as happened in 2016, was unheard of. Now, Oklahoma's earthquake frequency fell with lower oil prices and regulators' decision to require companies to decrease their well injection volume, but there are still more earthquakes there today than there were in 2010. Now, a familiar pattern has been emerging in West Texas in the past few years, drastically increasing earthquake rates well beyond the natural rate. For instance, a magnitude 5 earthquake shook West Texas in March. Now, at the root of the induced earthquake problem are 2 different types of fluid injection operations: hydraulic fracturing and wastewater disposal. Hydraulic fracturing involves injecting water, sand, and chemicals at very high pressures to create flow pathways for hydrocarbons trapped in tight rock formations. Or as I like to put it, getting the microscopic bubbles out of that are trapped in the rocks. That's where they're getting it. Microscopic bubbles. Although wastewater disposal involves injecting fluids into deep geological formations. Although wastewater is pumped at low pressures, this type of operation can disturb natural pressures and stresses over large areas several miles from injection wells. Now, the idea for doing this back in the day is when they started using steam injection. The reason for doing that was that because I used to work in this industry, taking out mass, volume from the formation, and which is the oil. And so then the idea to keep that formation intact, you put volume back in. And so wastewater and other types of fluids would be used. And in steam injection, these formations were so old that really what was left was the tarry deposits inside the formation, which is just a big cave. So they'd put steam and fluids in there to fill up the volume, which then would, of course, add pressure. And the tarry substance would become viscous enough so that it could be pumped out. So it makes you wonder how many earthquakes have been caused from that technique that is over 40 years old. Anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The nation's first regional hub for flying cars is being built in Central Florida, and once completed in 5 years, the vehicles will be able to take passengers from Orlando to Tampa in half an hour. The Tavistock Development Corp. said it was constructing a Jetson-like aviation facility in Orlando's Lake Nona area. The mixed-use planned community it built. Lake Nona already is home to several medical and research facilities. I'm sure they're going to like all the buzzing around from these cars. The aircraft will be supplied by Lilium, a Germany-based aviation company that manufactures the industry's only 5-passenger electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. At the moment, the Lilium jets can travel up to 185 miles on a 1 hour charge. Oh, okay. Passengers wanting a ride on the aircraft will be able to book reservations via their phones in a way similar to rideshare companies Uber and Lyft. Wait a second. I thought George Jetson and his wife Jane would be able to drive and fly these cars themselves. I guess there's a learning curve. The vehicles flying and landing out of Lake Nona Vertiport will accommodate 4 passengers and a pilot. The cost will be similar to a first-class fare, though the price will likely go down as service becomes more popular or it goes out of business because of all the crashes. Unlike airplanes and helicopters, the vehicles offer quick point-to-point personal travel, at least in principle. They could do away with the hassle of airports and traffic jams, and maybe even traffic controllers. Who needs them? Battery sizes, air traffic control, and other infrastructure issues are among the many potential challenges to commercializing them, according to experts. Experts compare the buzz over flying cars to the days when the aviation industry got started with the Wright brothers and the auto industry with the Ford Model T. Hey, wait a second. They promised us jetpacks. I still want my jetpack. Okay, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Gaines. As fall turns to winter, the flu season will be upon us in force. The best way to avoid influenza is to get immunized. Dr. Joe Brazee is a researcher with CDC's National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases. He's joining us today to discuss the importance of getting the flu vaccine. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thank you.
Joe, let's start with how long does the flu season last?
In general, flu seasons will last for several months in the United States at the national level. Each year it begins in the fall, usually peaks between January and March, and ends in the spring. But the timing of flu season is unpredictable, especially at the local level. So because we can't tell for sure when it will start, when it will peak, and when it will end in every community, we want to make sure that people get vaccinated as early as possible when the flu vaccines become available in the late summer and early fall.
Well, who should get vaccinated?
Everyone 6 months of age and older should get vaccinated against the flu each and every year. This is especially important for people at high risk of complications or severe flu if they get infected.
Which groups are at higher risk for complications from the flu?
Well, some people are at especially higher risk for severe flu or complications. These are people who are very young, like kids under 5 years of age, anybody 65 years and older, and people with underlying health disorders like heart disease, lung disease, kidney disease, or diseases of the immune system, and pregnant women.
Joe, how effective is the vaccine for preventing flu?
Well, vaccine is the single best way to protect you and your family from the flu each year. Most years, the vaccine reduces a person's chance of getting the flu and complications from the flu by about 50 to 70%. But how well it works can vary from season to season and by person. So remember that vaccine is one of 3 ways you can protect yourself against the flu. The other ones are good hygiene, like hand washing, covering your cough, staying home when you're sick, and finally medications. There are medications that your doctor can prescribe to treat the flu if you get it.
Are there any side effects from getting vaccinated?
Well, there are 2 types of flu vaccines. First, the shots. The most common side effects with the flu shots are soreness or redness in your arm for a day or 2 after getting the vaccine. The nasal spray vaccines can cause runny nose or congestion or low-grade fever in some people for, again, about a day or two after getting the vaccine. So these side effects are mild compared with the disease itself, which causes hundreds of thousands of hospitalizations and tens of thousands of deaths each year in the United States. Remember that the vaccine is the safest and most effective way to prevent flu each and every year.
Joe, where can listeners get more information about the flu vaccine?
We'll go to cdc.gov/flu.
Thanks, Joe. I've been talking today with CDC's Dr. Joe Brazee about the annual flu vaccine. Remember, everyone 6 months and older should be vaccinated. To get your annual flu vaccine, see your healthcare provider or go to a pharmacy, grocery store, or clinic in your area. If you get influenza, talk with your healthcare provider right away about antiviral medication. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Robert Gaines for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1995. That was the day that healthcare workers in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, walked off the job in a wildcat strike. Budget cuts in Alberta, under the leadership of Premier Ralph Klein, had hit healthcare particularly hard. A massive restructuring plan called for deep cuts, privatization, and reducing services. As part of this trend, the Calgary Regional Health Authority had decided to contract out the work of 120 laundry personnel. The workers were members of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Local 8. The laundry workers walked off the job in protest. Soon, they were joined in solidarity on the picket line by housekeepers, orderlies, nurses, and other hospital workers. 8 hospitals across the city were impacted by the walkout. Community members joined in and marched on the picket lines, frustrated by the government cuts. Twice, the Labor Relations Board ordered the workers to go back to their jobs. Twice, the workers refused. The strike spread to Calgary, where more than 2,500 healthcare workers walked off the job. In Edmonton, workers stood ready to strike. Talk of a general strike began to circulate. In Calgary, the union met with management for a 19-hour marathon bargaining session, and the 10-day strike ended. The health authority agreed to wait 8 months before contracting out any labor. Workers were given severance packages, and the government stopped any further cuts to the industry. But the settlement did little to appease the dissatisfaction of the healthcare workers. The strike had also shown the potential connections between workers' issues on the job and the concerns of community members. The cutbacks hurt both labor and the general public and brought them together to stand in solidarity. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
For once, the Trump administration told the truth about something.
We're not going to control the pandemic.
The United States reported 145,835 new coronavirus cases on Wednesday alone, another day, another all-time high. We're also breaking records in the number of hospitalizations. The U.S. now has had more than 10.3 million total infections and over 240,000 fatalities. Yep, the country also saw its highest daily death toll since early May. More people are hospitalized with COVID-19 this week than at any point in the pandemic, and hospitals are running out of beds and healthcare workers, which could cause some major problems. The situation is particularly dire in the Midwest and the Sun Belt, and the Navajo Nation and El Paso, Texas are also being hit really hard. So it's probably a good time to repeat the latest guidance from the CDC that says not only can wearing a mask help protect others, it can also protect you. Wear a mask. New York is set to reimpose some restrictions, a 10 p.m. curfew for most bars and restaurants, private gatherings limited to 10 people, and other restrictions like gyms having to close at 10 p.m. Those restrictions will take effect this Friday. Now, you'd think with all this awful news dominating the headlines, any president would be thrilled with Monday's news from Pfizer, who touted their experimental COVID vaccine is showing a 90% effective rate. Well, with Donald Trump, it's the opposite, as usual. According to the Washington Post, Trump screamed at the FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn following Pfizer's announcement and demanded to know why it came after the election. Although Trump has convinced himself the timing of the announcement was politically motivated, there's zero evidence that Pfizer held back its data showing the inoculation was so promising. Well, despite the fact that the Trump administration is refusing to recognize Joe Biden's win, the president-elect has begun putting together his administration's senior leadership. On Wednesday, Biden named his longtime confidant and Democratic operative Ron Klain as his White House chief of staff. Klain was Biden's chief of staff when he was vice president and first worked for Biden back in 1989 when he was one of Delaware's senators. Biden said in a statement that Klain was an invaluable advisor who worked with him during the 2009 economic crisis and the 2014 Ebola outbreak. Also on Wednesday, Biden had his first call since the election with leaders of Japan, South Korea, and Australia. The three allies reportedly reaffirmed plans for close ties with the president-elect on such issues as climate change and security. At least they were able to get through. Dozens of world leaders have reportedly sent congratulatory messages to Joe Biden since his victory was confirmed last week, but CNN is reporting that the notes are being withheld by the State Department, which has been instructed by the White House not to pass them on. Embarrassingly, foreign leaders have had to work around the uncooperative State Department and have reportedly had to reach out to Obama-era diplomats to ask how to get a congratulatory message to Joe Biden. The State Department hasn't commented on the report. But slowly, there's a little group growing of Republican senators urging the Trump administration to stop blocking the transition process. Senator James Langford of Oklahoma announced in a radio interview that if Trump denies President-elect Joe Biden access to the classified President's Daily Brief intelligence report by Friday, that he would step in. Mitt Romney, Mike Rounds, Pat Toomey, and even reportedly Marco Rubio all made similar statements. Now, if you are unfortunate enough to be on the Trump campaign's email list, you've no doubt been bombarded with requests for money to help pay for legal challenges to the election results. One message says the left will try to steal this election, and apparently they're going out numerous times an hour. But if you read the really small print, you learn that a donor would have to give more than $8,000 before any of it goes to the recount account established to finance election challenges. In a Washington Post editorial Thursday morning, Dana Milbank suggests that Trump's election challenge is just another money-making scam. Who would have ever thought that? So, back to the counting. Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger announced Wednesday that officials would conduct a hand recount of the millions of ballots cast there. Joe Biden leads Trump by around 14,000 votes in Georgia out of millions cast. Raffensperger previously said that a recount was unlikely to reverse Biden's lead. And in Pennsylvania, another state that Trump is contesting, Biden is now up by more than 50,000 votes, or 0.7%, enough to avoid an automatic recount. Even if Trump were to gain thousands of ballots with a recount, considered highly unlikely based on past histories of recounts, nothing would be enough to put Trump over the 270 vote threshold in the Electoral College. And that's especially true now that it's official. Arizona goes to Biden. Although the Associated Press and Fox Not News called Arizona for Biden on election night, Decision Desk HQ and the Arizona Republic finally called the race Wednesday night after another batch of votes came in from Maricopa County. That raised Biden's lead there to over 11,000 votes, ensuring there's no path to victory in Arizona for Trump. Nationwide, the 2020 elections went surprisingly smoothly, with no credible evidence of fraud or serious irregularities. This, according to the Associated Press and the New York Times. But the numbers of votes cast was astounding. More than 66% of eligible voters participated. More than 101 million early ballots were cast, certainly making history. As for the popular vote numbers, wow. Donald Trump has 47%. With 72,390,228 votes in his favor. That's more than the amount of votes cast in any presidential election for a particular candidate, except for Joe Biden in this election year. Joe Biden, with 51% of the votes, garnered 77,651,438 votes and counting. Georgia is the only state left to be called. But with Arizona now going to Biden and Alaska going to Trump, the latest tally of the Electoral College votes stands at 290 for Biden, 232 for Trump. Of course, it just takes 270 to win. Again, we're still waiting on the final tally from Georgia, which is going to a full recount. But Biden is in the lead. And if Georgia ultimately does go to Biden, the final Electoral College vote will be 306 to 232. The same outcome as in 2016 when Trump got the 306 and called it a landslide, blowout, historic. I got good news. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Looks like we're going to have a mix of clouds and sun during the morning, giving way to cloudy skies this afternoon with only highs in the upper 40s to low 50s. Winds light and variable. Tonight we're going to be in the mid to upper 30s and cloudy with an occasional rain shower late. And it looks like we're going to be bumping about a quarter of an inch overnight. And then tomorrow, highs in the upper 40s. Winds will be out of the west-southwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour, bringing with it a half inch of rain and a lot more rain. 1 inch down to about a quarter inch for the next 4 to 5 days. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon now stands at 2,484 with 8 confirmed deceased. Pollen here in Rogue River proper is rated at none. The air quality index for the region is good at 20 parts per million. and the daytime UV index is low at 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.12 inches. Visibility is down to a quarter mile, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 55 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 56 and partly cloudy. Rome is 65 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 39 and just merely cloudy. Kabul is 55 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 65 and clear of democracy, apparently. Tokyo is 53 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 70 degrees with showers in the vicinity. San Francisco, California is 46 degrees and sunny. And New York is 55 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy, with a weather advisory of wind and rain. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Unidentified assailants sprayed the embassy of Saudi Arabia in the Netherlands with gunfire before dawn today. No one was hurt in the incident. Dutch police said there had been no arrests after the building was hit just before 6 a.m. local time. Images on Dutch television showed casings scattered on the street and bullet holes in the windows. A police spokesman said the motive was under investigation and it was unclear who might have been responsible. The incident occurred a day after an explosion at the World War I remembrance ceremony involving foreign embassies in the Saudi city of Jeddah, which wounded several people. The explosion was the second security incident to take place in the Red Sea port city in the last couple of weeks, and the first apparent bomb attack targeting foreigners in the conservative kingdom.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Colin Packham of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Australia will appoint a special investigator to determine whether to prosecute members of the country's military for alleged crimes committed in Afghanistan, Prime Minister Scott Morrison said today. Australia, in 2016, launched an inquiry into the conduct of its special forces personnel between 2005 and 2016, amid allegations by local media about the killing of unarmed men and children. While Morrison did not reveal details of the report, which is set to be released next week, he said it will contain difficult and hard news for Australians. Given the likely allegations and serious and possibly criminal misconduct, the matters raised in the inquiry must be assessed, investigated, and where allegations are substantiated, prosecuted in court, Morrison told reporters. Morrison said the special investigator was needed to probe into the actions of some of Australia's military in Afghanistan was so complex that it would overwhelm and distract the country's normal criminal prosecutor. Well, good for Australia. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. And you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on. And we're going to meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, and don't we deserve it? So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.